Welcome to Torrential Riff. Today's special guest is David Bach, the bassist from Guardian. Guardian has sold over 1 million records worldwide. Let's hear what David has to say on the riff. Let's go. Welcome to Torrential Riff. Today's guest is David Bach, the bassist from Guardian. It is an honor to have you on my show. Thank you for taking the time and answering some questions.
Cool. Thanks, man. It's an honor to be here, man. Happy to chat with you, man.
Yeah, this is really cool. So just let you know, the fans are out there. With social media, have you gone on and been like, hey, our fans are still out there and they still love our music? Have you seen any of that on social media?
Right, yeah, and it kind of ebbs and flows. Like, I used to be on social media more a few years ago, but yeah, it ebbs and flows, and I try and keep up with it and stuff like that. And again, it's exciting that people are still interested in Guardian, so it's all good, man.
Nice. So we'll start at the beginning. How old were you when you started playing bass, or what got you into playing bass?
Right. No, that's a great question. As far as playing bass, I started probably when I was about 15, but let me go back a little bit. Like, when I was a little kid, my parents had me take piano lessons, and then I played saxophone in the junior high school band. And then, I got into rock and roll like every kid. When I went to my parents and said, hey, I really want an electric guitar. And they're going, well, you've got the piano and you got the saxophone. It's like, no, Mom and Dad, you don't understand.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. So after much a discussion, my dad let me trade in my saxophone for an electric guitar. It was this basic Guild electric guitar. It was just with a single humbucking pickup. But I had a guitar, and there was this band at school. They were a rock band at school, and they were older than I was. And I just wanted to play with them so bad. Mm-hmm. And the guitar player, he was really cool to me. He took me aside and showed me a few things. And then we would, they would let me play in the garage with them. And they kept losing bass players. So it would be me, two guitars in the garage, and there was no bass. And finally, this guy, his name was Willie Kang. Thanks, Willie, because he taught me to play. He said, man, the bass players are hard to come by. He goes, I'm telling you, man, if you would consider playing bass, dude, you could play as much as you want. I was like, okay, but I don't have a bass. So as it turned out, our school band had this electric bass. And it was like this copy of the bad copy of a Fender Jazz bass. It was just like John Paul Jones bass, but it was like this big pig of a neck and strings that were 10 years old. So what we did, this is kind of a funny story. We would, on Friday afternoon, we would discreetly borrow it. We'd sneak it out of the band room, and we'd take it on the weekend, and then we'd sneak it back in on Monday morning. And, I look back, I think our band teacher, he was really cool. I think he may have known, but obviously he couldn't have let us borrow that bass. But anyway, yeah. I started playing. A friend of ours had a PA. I didn't have a bass amp, so we would plug the bass into the PA. And I remember the first time we all were like, whoa, there was all this low end. We're playing Dazed and Confused, Led Zeppelin, and the bass sounded just like that, with those big dead flat ones. We're like, oh man, there's all this thrust. And I was like, oh, I like this, man. I like this. Yeah, I'm down to play bass. And that's kind of how it started. And Willie was right. I mean, I ended up at that point, I played with those guys, and then I kept getting better and better, and I got my own bass and got an amp. And I played with so many bands. I mean, I think Guardian was like my 17th band. I played in so many bands in the LA area, because again, there was a shortage of bass players. Right. And once I got decent, it was like, oh, hey man, come play with us. And I would be gigging. I'm 17 years old, and I'm out there like playing the clubs and playing backyard parties, which were crazy back then. People would have kegs of beer and 200 people in their backyard. You can't get away with that these days.
No.
But so that's kind of how that kind of started.
Yeah.
And from there, just kept playing in bands, and that's how originally I met Paul Cawley. Paul. I was playing in a band called No Surprise. The singer in that band, his name was Mike Christie. Mike later went on and played bass for one of the big LA bands at that time, Legs Diamond. If anyone's into LA, early LA hard rock metal, great band.
Yeah, I know.
And then Paul played in Debut. We were from Orange County, and I kind of knew Debut, and he knew No Surprise a little bit. And there was this person that we both knew. She was kind of a notorious drug dealer down there in Orange County, and she would have parties and she would have bands play, and No Surprise played there once, and Debut played there once. So I knew them and they knew me. And then one night there was some crazy party, and I knew Paul from Debut, and he and I sat down when everybody's partying and it's all crazy, and he and I had this 4-hour talk. I think he and I nursed one beer each over 4 hours while there was all this debauchery going on. And we're talking about music, bands we loved, like Kiss and Rush and Van Halen and Angel, and even there was an Orange County band, the Snowmen, that we both liked. That they were all white. And they were, we're just talking. We're like, man, we totally clicked. And then we're like, yeah, man, we should get together. I'm a musician. Here's my phone number and all that kind of stuff. And of course, nothing happened because, musicians are we just went on our own separate way. And then I went to France for a year. I had an opportunity to go to college at the Sorbonne in France. So I went there, and that's where I had a Bible. I mean, I was not a Christian. I was pretty serious partying rock and roll guy.
Yep.
And I'm there alone in Paris, and I would read this Bible in the park. And I was and I'm reading it and I'm going, okay. I just had that moment where it's okay, what you're saying in here, God, I want. I remember sitting there in the park going, okay, God, I don't really know what to do, but I basically said, yeah, I want to do this. I want to be a Christian, whatever that meant. But I mean, I didn't have a church there or anything. I just kind of, and then when I came back, I got a job at Fullerton Music, which was the hip music store in Orange County. It's where all those Fullerton of punk bands, Adolescents, Social Distortion, TSOL, Agent Orange, all those bands, that they came out of that that was that store. And so here I am, kind of this rock dude. These guys were more punk, so they weren't really down with me, but they were cool, So anyway, so I'm working at this store, and there was a newspaper called A Recycler, which is where musicians, it's it's like how Craigslist is now.
Right.
There was one ad, and I saw this ad, and it was high energy, heavy theatrical rock bands, a Christian rock band seeks bassist. I'm like, what? I didn't know. I knew I wanted to play rock. I know I was a Christian, but I didn't know anything really about Christian music. And also, I answered the ad, and I'm talking to this guy. I'm going, wait a minute, dude, is your name Paul? Yeah. And he goes, dude, do you remember at this lady's house? And he goes, oh yeah, your name's David. So anyway, so we had known each other.
Yeah.
I had known Debut and and I knew Steve Martinez and his brother James from Tustin, which is where I lived. And it's funny, so we knew each other, and he goes, yeah, man, I got this vision. So I went down and I just sat down with he and Steve and Paul. He had the vision for Guardian, the armor, all this kind of stuff, all the stuff we talked about, before, because he goes, I want to do a futuristic band. So here it was. We were now all brand new Christians, me, Steve, and and Paul. So we got this thing going, and they hadn't really had anything going. And then because I'm more of a kind of a pragmatic, tactical guy, all of a sudden Paul had a partner. So we went out and we got a rehearsal studio. We formed a business, and we kind of, and so the band kind of kicked into gear. And that was my first introduction to Christian music. You know, Paul goes, you got to check out these bands at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. And I hadn't really checked them out. So I went down there. I think the first band I saw was the Res Band with Paul.
Yeah.
Like Daryl Mansfield and stuff. And I'm going, oh, these bands rock. They kind of rock, because I'd heard some maybe contemporary Christian music on the radio in Orange County, and it just wasn't my cup of tea. It was kind of just mellow and pop, good music, but I was like, I didn't know there was, you know, a Christian rock. So we would go through a bunch of guys, and we're kind of get the armor together, and it's just all this just slugging it out. And then so Rikk Hart, who was from Tustin, where I'm from, he answered an ad. He comes in with, you know, Rick's this happy-go-lucky guy with his white gums. He goes, hey, man, have you guys heard of Striper? This new local band. He goes, yeah, they used to be Rock's Regime. And I'm going, okay, I knew Rock's Regime. We used to actually play on the circuit in No Surprise with them. So anyway, Rikk pops in the Striper demo tape, and we were like, wow. This is like, okay, you know, Res Band and Daryl Mansfield were cool, but Striper was like,
yeah,
as kick butt as any band
yep.
in LA. Like all the guitars, we're like going, oh, light bulb moment. Like, okay, yeah, this is what, because we knew we wanted to rock, but we didn't know what that was about. So that's how we kind of got into Christian music, and that kind of gave us, you know, and Striper was like the forerunner for all those LA bands. Barren Cross, all those bands. It was like, you know, Striper kind of ignited a movement. There was a lot of guys our age who were getting saved, who were, you know, rock and roll people. And there was this thing going, yeah, there was like almost this spiritual calling over the whole LA area at that time. And that's when Sanctuary and Bob Beeman and stuff.
Yep.
And there was some structure. So there was this community of bands, and that's where kind of the whole, that's where kind of Guardian came up with. When we first started, we were called Fusion, or put on the full armor of God, and the first business entity, you know, Paul and I formed was Infused Productions. So we were called Fusion, and Paul's brother, you know, Reggie, is taking this motocross armor and he's putting studs on it and he's working every night. And it's just like, it's this labor of love, because we had no money.
Right.
We had these day jobs. Paul and I were like a warehouseman for, you know, Mitsubishi, like writing songs on the forklift, you know, and just doing what we could to slowly put this together, working on songs. And we were Fusion. And then we had a chance to, Phil Kagey's nephew, Eddie, had a little studio in Fullerton again. He had like a little home studio, and we heard about him, and we heard, hey, Eddie, he can make you a demo and it'll sound good and it'll be cheap. So Paul had, I don't know, those first 6 songs, you know, Voyager and all those songs. We were really honing this progressive metal sound where I was playing Taurus pedals, and it was really kind of, you know, weird stops and starts. And, you know, Paul does that stuff so well, like, you know, writing songs that would go, and then drop into like odd keys with weird time signatures. And so we like went into this studio and made the first Fusion. You know, it was a demo, but we called it an EP, because for us, it was, you know, it was Paul, Rikk, and I. We had other guys in the band, but we just kept having turnover. Yeah. So it was just Paul, Rikk, and I who went in the studio and made that demo. In fact, Paul's sister Dee Dee sang backgrounds on some stuff because she could sing really high. So now much better background singer than I was. But anyway, so we had the Fusion tape. So I'm probably racing ahead, but you know.
No, that's fine. No,
so
playing guitar. So Tony wasn't in the band at this point.
No, we had some really good guitar players. So we made this tape, but it was still just Paul, Rikk, and I. And Paul's, Rick's buddy, Eric Blair, who worked for Striper. So we made this Fusion tape. And if you know Eric, he's got this really aggressive personality in a good way. But so he was in the Striper camp. So he had access to Wes Hine, who was the president of Enigma Records. And you know, Eric took our tape and said, Eric talks like this. And he goes, yeah, man, Wes, you got to check this band out. You guys are great. And he fucking, Wes is like, yeah. He's a label president. He gets tapes all the time. But somehow he got him to listen to our tape. And later we found out that, Wes actually liked quirky progressive metal and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, long story short, one night he said, yeah, Wes is going to come down and see you guys. We're going, no way.
You're like, yeah, right.
So it was Paul, Rikk, and I. We had this little rehearsal studio, which was like an industrial shed in Santa Ana, California. Sure enough, Wes shows up, and it's Wes Hine and us in our little dingy industrial shed. And we played him the songs, and he's just kind of standing there nodding his head, and and then we played a few songs, and he stopped us and he goes, "That's cool, man. I just kind of wanted to be sure that the band on the tape that was you guys." I'm going, "Yeah." So we were kind of going, okay, awkward song, and he goes, "Yeah, and I'd like to sign you guys." And we're like, "What?" It was like, I'll never forget it. I could see us standing there. We were all like warehousemen. I think Rikk worked for a construction company. We were wearing jeans and dirty T-shirts, and we're just like, what? That was God working. And he's like, yeah, man. Get a lawyer. I'll send you a contract. And so like Eric made that connection, and Wes, he offered us a record deal. I mean, it was a beginner, a record deal. It was kind of a developmental deal, but it was a contract. And then by that time, we'd added a guitar player named David Caro, who was a great guitar player. So we were a four-piece because, Wes goes, Paul, you're great, but you need like a lead guitar player, so you can sing and front the band more. Right. So it was Paul, Rikk, David Caro, and myself, September of like 85, in my little kitchen of my apartment in Tustin. We like signed our record deal.
Wow.
And it was funny because we were not ready, and Wes knew it. So he would have us go in, and we'd, occasionally he'd pay for us to go in the studio and make demos. So we're making demos, but word got out, man, that band Fusion, they got a record deal. Can you believe that? Those guys who wear that weird armor and play those weird songs. So we kind of got involved in the whole Southern California sanctuary scene and all that. And we stood out because we were this weird metal band. Anyway, David Caro left the band. He had just some, personal issues. He'd moved like 2 hours away, and he just couldn't come and practice. So Rikk put out an ad, unbeknownst to Paul and I, hey, David was like just, left, and one night Tony shows up. Like, we didn't even know, Paul and I didn't even know he was coming. So he comes in, and Tony was playing this kind of Duran type band, a Christian band, but we had, big hair, but it was different. He had big, like Duran hair.
Yeah.
He comes in, and then, he plugs in, and as soon as he plays, we're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. In fact, I remember walking out with him saying, dude, you're great, but you're like way better than like we are. Are you sure you want to play? No, again, we had a record deal, but he was like, yeah, that whole thing with the armor. He goes, I don't really, I don't know what to think about all that, but I really feel like God's telling me that I'm supposed to join your band. So he joined our band. So all of a sudden it's like this new jet engine playing. And then things started to kind of happen quick with like Otonian. We kept making demos, and we kept doing things like this. But it was a long stretch between, because Tony joined like in 86, like a year after we'd been signed for about a year, and he joined in 86, and we kept slugging away. And originally we thought, we wanted Michael and Robert Sweet, a Stryper, to produce our record because they were the main guys, and we kind of knew them. But Stryper was like, their camp was really protected. Like, you couldn't just call up and get those guys on the phone because
they were starting to get big at that point.
They were blowing up, and so they had their whole posse of people who worked with them and stuff. And so we asked Wes, and Wes goes, well, interestingly enough, there's another band we're going to sign out of Boston called Mass, and Mike's going to produce them. But Oz Fox, the guitar player, he's interested in producing bands. We're like, cool. Like, we're like, whatever, man. one night Oz came down and he walked into that same shed. And if you know Oz, like, I've got a loud, abrasive voice, but Oz is like times 10. Hey, dudes, what's going on? I'm Oz. We're just like, and so he goes, yeah, let's start working. And Wes goes, yeah, just work with Oz. You kind of just get going. So Oz just came in like a drill sergeant in a good way.
So what year was that, or time frame?
I want to say this was 87 by that point. Tony joined in 86, so it was about a year later, 80, or maybe 87. Oz came in, it was kind of like, yeah, let's make this record. And like I said, we had a very basic record deal. There was no money. I mean, there was like not a lot of money, to make our first record, because Enigma was still an indie label.
Right.
So Striper was a big band for them, and they broke a lot of early bands, early Motley Crue and early this and that kind of thing. But it still wasn't a big budget. And we were certainly not a priority. We were kind of like Wes's little weird metal project. Yeah. So, and by that point, we were playing in the Armor and playing around town and doing all that. And and the Armor, just people struggled with it. They're like, you guys are like, this is ridiculous. And people loved it or hated it. We just got made fun of, and especially when Tony got in the band, they're going, "You got this ripping guitar player, and you guys are wearing motocross gear. Like, you guys need to." And we've had so many managers, but our manager at that time was a lady who never gets mentioned. I'm going to mention her, Sharon Shubin. Hi, Sharon. Thank you. She kind of said, "Yeah, guys, you really pray about it, but I really feel like you need to lose the Armor. You can still be Guardian, you can still do everything, but let's put the U back in. Let's make it Guardian." Because it was GARDIAN because it was 7 letters.
Yeah.
And to be fair, because people said, well, you guys are spelling it wrong. Well, Motley Crue spells their name wrong, and Def Leppard does. So it was not without a precedent. But and she made us all those costumes on First Watch. She was a professional, like worked on film sets and made costumes. She made all those original Guardian First Watch, the leather outfits and stuff. She made all that stuff by hand.
Wow.
For us. So all of a sudden, for better or worse, we were kind of another LA hair band.
Right. That was big at that point.
Yeah, it was just kind of a decision that we made. And I know it was hard for Paul because the Armor and everything, that was his baby. Mm-hmm. I mean, I supported it from day one and rocked the Armor, and we did all that. So anyways, so that brings us up to about, so in 87, because we were kind of part of that scene, the Elefante brothers, John and Dino Elefante, John being in Kansas, and actually Tony and I had known them a little bit just from who they were on the scene.
Yeah.
And then Bob Beeman, Sanctuary, because we knew Bob and we were kind of in that posse of community of bands. I think Bob and John and Dino got together, and I think Regency Records said, hey, Bob, all these bands. John and Dino, you can produce all these bands. Why don't you have Bob pick some bands? Let's go in the studio and let's make this compilation record. It'll be called California Metal. Mm-hmm. Now, we were signed to Enigma at that time, but we were still in development. And Wes was like, yeah, guys, go do it. Because he just wanted to get us reps. He's like, okay, you guys are making progress, but you're not quite ready for the international stage. So
that's cool. That's cool that he allowed you to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, Wes was a smart guy. I mean, and we were like, we're ready. Oh, well, let's record now. But in retrospect, he was right. We were getting better, but we still weren't as good as we could have been.
Also in the Christian, me growing up in church, you go to the Christian bookstore, you'd see the California Metal, like, wow, these are great metal bands. So again, with the Christian audience, you're already a name. So that's why we toured around.
It's funny you mention that because it never gets mentioned, and it's going to sound like I'm bragging, but I'm not. But it's like, if you look at pictures of Guardian in the Armor in the day, and you look at the cover of California Metal, and the guy's got the long flowing hair, and he's kind of got the Armor on, and I go, wait a minute. That's me, man.
Right. We did that first.
How I look. And I think I asked David Malmy from Regency. He goes, yeah, it could have been you. We definitely looked at pictures of other bands and we made the guy. So that's my claim to fame. That's me on California. I can't prove that. But
So what was it like being in the studio with John and Dino at that point in time in '87?
Yeah.
Recording.
So California, that was our first introduction to them, and they were very regimented, disciplined guys. I mean, both of them are great musicians. They had their own studio. It was like a world-class studio. So that was our first time really. This is even before we worked with Oz.
Okay.
Just working with guys who had like a system. You got drum sounds and you overdubbed everything. Because, before when bands made demos, you just went to a studio, you mic'd it up and you cut the whole thing in 6 hours and hoped it was good. So that was our first time really working with like guys who knew what to do. So that was a really good experience for us.
Because I had heard that like the drums all sound the same in every band because they use the same drum set.
Right. No, well, they were smart. They got it. We've got a good drum sound. Nobody touch anything.
Right.
You guys, you're different drummers, play different. But yeah, they got that. They were smart. They're like, no, the drums sound great. You guys come in, you plug into this amp because this bass amp sounds good. Yeah. So we plugged into their existing rigs, and then every band obviously sounds different. So it sounded different. But yeah, they definitely had it kind of dialed in.
And one of those songs is Marching On, which made it on to First Watch. The other one was Spiritual Warfare, which has never been released since or recorded. That was a great song.
So California Metal happened, and that was kind of a big thing. That was like, I mean, obviously Stryper was the supernova and was blowing up, but that kind of gave the whole LA scene, the big LA Christian metal scene, kind of like a stage. And it was just, it was exciting. There was just so much stuff going on. And then, it's funny. It used to bum us out because we signed with Enigma first, and then Enigma signed Barren Cross. And Barren Cross's record came out before ours, but they were more ready at that time. I mean, they were more dialed in than we were, and we were friends with them. So it was cool. But we're like, wait a minute, man, wait, we want our record to come out. So anyway, Oz came in, started working with us. And again, he was like a drill sergeant in a good way. He came in with this, I think it was a Lynn or an Oberheim, a drum machine. And it was like this click track. And he put it through our practice OPA at like 120 dB. And it was hand clapping sound of a drum machine. So it's like, bah, 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 bah. And like for hours, he'd drill us on song tempos and we'd play it until our ears were like melting, and we'd play and we all had day jobs, and Oz would drive down every night because he lived up in LA. So he would drive down an hour every night, practice with us. We'd play until midnight. He'd take us out to Denny's and buy us food. I mean, he was just so instrumental in kind of really making us ready to be kind of more of a national band, which is what Enigma wanted.
Right.
And so finally, after much drilling, we went in the studio. No budget. Oz cut all these deals. He cut a deal with Sound City, which is funny because Sound City is now this famous, iconic thing. But back then, it was kind of a burnout. It had been big in the 70s, and it was kind of, this is 88. So Paul, Oz cut a deal with Paula, the studio manager, for us to go in at night. So we would go in at night from like 10 in the evening to 7 in the morning. And he got a good rate. But we cut on that board in that room that console that Dave Grohl bought, and the whole movie. And the place was like, at that time, it was run down. It was like shag carpeting this thick on the walls, and God knows what had been spilled on it, and it stank. It was funky, but we're like, we're making a record. So we actually turned that record in. We probably started, I want to say we started making it in about March of 88, and then we turned it in June of 88, and then through a whole nother long series of events, it kind of sat for a year. Like Wes goes, okay, this is great, but we're not going to release it yet. We want you guys to get management.
Oh, I was
So
gonna
we
say,
got,
I wonder if it was because like Striper was coming out and Baron Cross was
well, there was a
Does
lot
that
of
matter?
talk about that, but in retrospect, that wasn't true. I mean, Stryper was a platinum act.
Oh yeah,
They were, so we're like, we're still a baby band. No, Wes, in his wisdom, said, get real management. So we got some real LA, real managers, played up and down California, and Wes was smart. So over that next year, we built up, we got to where we were headlining the Roxy and Whiskey and selling it out. We like had to follow him. And, Wes was smart. So for a whole year, our record finally came out in June of '89, but it was great because we came out of the box strong. Like we sold 30,000 records in the first month, which was a lot.
So, yeah,
that was a lot.
Yeah.
So we were off to the races, man, and we went out on our first national tour, and because before we basically played up and down the coast of California, but all of a sudden we're playing everywhere. We're driving in our van and trailer, and we're showing up at Daytona Beach, Florida, and people knew Guardian. It was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Guess we went up stuff, but yeah, that was, and we were still playing those kind of songs like Paul's. Those are more classic Paul theatrical songs, and Tony was like writing a lot of stuff like I'll Never Leave You and that type of really more melodic metal. It was a good mix because at that time it was primarily Tony and Paul writing the bulk of it. I mean, we all contributed, but
right.
Tony brought his kind of virtuoso thing, and then Paul had his very unique style, which kind of, first watch is kind of a mishmash of the old and new.
Yep.
We were trying to be more commercial, but there's still some of that, like Saints Battalion and stuff like that. There's still some of the old futuristic metal.
Yeah, for me personally as a fan, I think that's Tony's best work. That record, he smoked.
Well, he rips. Tony's an amazing musician, but that was the height of guitar ripping.
Yes.
Tony could rip as good or better that was what gave us a lot of credibility. Tony was as good as any other gunslinger.
Yeah, because back in the 80s...
The LA scene, Christian or secular, he was as good as any.
Because back in the 80s, it was like, George Lynch, Van Halen, Red Beach from Winger. You had all those amazing...
Right.
Like, that's what you needed back then.
Right, and, and I love and respect both of those guys. But Tony was as good a player.
I think he's just underrated in general. Like nobody.
Yeah, well,
talks about him.
Right. Well, and that's what's hard about Christian music. Like the whole Christian rock thing is like this subgenre.
Yeah, it's
Christian music. We were kind of like the redheaded stepchild. A lot of people in the church and in Christian music, they didn't dig it, but the kids dug it. There was a need,
Yeah, for me. So just a quick sub story. I would always collect cassettes back in the day. I didn't collect the CDs. I didn't know back in the day when CDs first came out, you had bonus tracks.
Right.
Well, on First Watch, you had Hyperdrive and Marching On.
Right.
I never heard those recordings maybe until like 10 years later.
Well, and like Hyperdrive is interesting because the original guitar player in Debut, Mike Abbott, who was great. He was the main singer in Debut. They actually had an early kind of local single called Kings. You should ask Paul. I've got a copy of it somewhere. It's this great kind of early Rushy type pre-fusion stuff, And Mike Abbott was this great singer. So Hyperdrive was a Mike Abbott song. Paul goes, man, we should play this song. And I love this song.
It's a great song.
When I first joined that band, I knew who Mike Abbott was, and I was like, they're like Paul and Steve because they were in that band. I was like, can we get Mike? And at that time, Mike wasn't a Christian. I just don't think he was interested. And I was like, let's get Mike Abbott. So, but as it turned out, we ended up cutting, Hyperdrive, which was one of Mike's songs, and so it was kind of cool how that worked out.
And I think did Oz play the leads on that on Hyperdrive? I think.
He and Tony traded leads.
Okay.
There's kind of an extended jam. I think there was another song. Yeah, Oz played a few things. It's mostly Tony ripping, but there's a few things. But like the whole double leads on like Rock and Victory, that's Paul and Tony. Because, Paul's a great guitar player, as well. I mean, he's not
Yeah, I guess.
shredder like Tony is. Few people are. But I mean, he was a great guitar player, and he would play all the double leads live. He would play guitar on songs and take off his guitar in front of the band.
Yeah. So what was the reasoning that they never did an MTV video for you guys? So how are people going to hear about you?
Well, it's pretty because he did give us money to make a video, and we actually shot footage for it. Was going to be one of a kind, which was written by Gene Thurston, who was another early member of Fusion, and that song kind of hung around and it changed and it morphed. We shot a video. We got a lockout at the country club in the valley and shot all the stage footage. And it's funny now, we did this thing, it was going to be this concept video, but that was kind of our one kind of boy-girl song. I mean, it was a Christian song.
Yeah, right.
No.
Something, a crossover commercial.
But this is funny. So we had this scene where this director, who was a friend of our manager's, wanted to get this footage of us walking along the beach in Malibu. So we're out there on the beach in Malibu in our leather pants and our cowboy boots, and we're like slogging through the sand, and it was just
gotta look cool.
So anyway, and we shot a bunch of stuff. We were going to try and get O2 videos out of it. I think we were trying to get performance for Kingdom of Rock and all that. Anyway, something happened. There was some glitches with the actual film. It was a young director. So we had the stuff shot, but those videos never got finished. There was like this big hang up, and then it was time to go on tour. And our manager at that time wisely said, yeah, we're going to take the rest of this money, and you guys need to use it as a down payment and, van and trailer and get on the road. So that footage still exists somewhere. I'd love to see it, but yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I never.
Enigma did have a video in mind, but it didn't happen.
Yeah,
and again, Wes was great. He's like, okay, well, that's a video would have been great, but get out on the road, because that's really the best thing.
Yeah, I remember Oz saying he actually got some guitar lessons from Tony.
Right.
Or against the law.
Right. Well, it's funny, when Tony joined our band, I mean, he was a very known guitar player in Orange County among guitar players, and he had like 50 guitar students. Wow. So it was great when Tony joined our band. All of a sudden, 50 new people would come to our shows, and they were all Tony students. And Tony's a great teacher. In fact, anybody who's a Tony fan, follow him on Instagram, Tony Tone Dog. He still does these little 1 minute guitar, lessons on Instagram. He's such a good teacher. And so I think Oz, I don't think he officially took like, hey, Tony, can I pay you for a guitar lesson? But I know that they sat down together, and Oz was like, yeah, man,
teach me this. Yeah. Stuff. So then Against the Law came out, and Oz was all over the Against the Law. Amazing.
Right. No, and I think, and that's how it works when like good players work together. You kind of
iron sharpens iron.
Exactly, and that's what happened, because I think Tony showed Oz new things to add to his arsenal, because Oz is a great guitar player, and so it just made Oz that much better with some of that new stuff that was kind of Tonyisms, if you will. But I mean, he made it his own. I mean, Oz is great. I mean, Oz is great. You
had mentioned like Tony was more or less into rock and metal, but he was more into pop. So
yeah,
did he say, hey, this metal stuff's great?
Right, and Tony just, he was that guy who we all knew who,
you could play anything.
Well, and he was that guy who sat in his bedroom in high school for 8 hours a day and played guitar. Yep. See, I played in bands, but I was trying to meet chicks and I want to play. But like Tony was like, and it shows in his playing. His level of musicianship to this day is still, he's kind of on another level, in a good way. I mean, he's one of those types of musicians.
Yeah. So first watch era ends and the band splits, what was the process of getting a new singer and drummer?
Yeah, that was a really bittersweet time because, like I said, we were touring nationally. The band was starting to pop, and I think Rikk left first, and you know, I think he shared about that in interviews. So
Yep.
that's kind of his story. But it was a bummer. Nobody wanted Rikk to leave a band. Rikk was such a great drummer, such a great showman. If you saw us live in those days, I mean, Rikk was like he was a big part of our show, and that was a bummer. That was a bummer. I remember his last date with us at Valparaiso University. I think it was snowing that night, and he got on a plane and went home, and we drove home thinking, what are we going to do? We've got an upcoming tour of Japan. And as it turned out, our friend Jimmy from Soldier, who's one of the most connected guys ever in the music business, he had a drummer in his band called Jason Souza, who was a great showman too. And I said, hey, man, I called him up as my friend, said, hey, dude, we need a drummer to go to Japan. Are you cool if we nick Jason? I kind of said, we'll just borrow him. And Jimmy, being the great guy that he is, said, yeah, man. And Jason was like, sure, I'll go to Japan. So Jason came down with us, great drummer, came down, practiced with us for like a week. And then we were on the plane to Japan, and he was kind of like in the band. He was in the band. So we thought, okay, well, that's kind of solved. And we came back, and then he actually got asked to be in a band called The Scream.
Oh, I remember that band.
Which had John Corabi, who was in Motley Crue, and Juan Alderete, who people, is just this basic. He was in Racer X. I used to know him as John Aldretti. But so he got invited to join this super band. So he's like, hey, guys, I appreciate the opportunity in Guardian, but I'm going to go play with this band. So we were without a drummer again. And we knew Carl Ney. He was kind of like a friend of ours. We knew him. He was kind of part of that scene, and we knew him and liked him. And Paul was like, well, I'm going to call Carl. Does Carl even play drums anymore? And so Carl had been rusty, but he came down one night and he was rusty. But I mean, he was good, but it was kind of like, we kind of prayed about it, and we just felt like it was kind of a God thing saying, this is your new drummer. So Carl joined. He got up to speed really quick, and we did his first show was with us, and there was a band, if you remember, a band called Christovox.
Oh,
we did a show with Christovox, a great band. They were out of San Diego. We did a thing, and then we'd been there wasn't a rift between Tony and Paul and myself, but there was just some unsettled things that we didn't agree upon. We didn't, I would say ever since we dropped the armor and stuff, we started moving in a different direction. I started writing more. A lot of my stuff was not like that. And it was just, there was creative tensions. We had some disagreements about stuff. Anyway, long story short, Paul left the band. He left. He said, I don't agree. We disagreed on some stuff. That's kind of Paul's story to tell. I'm not going to get into all that. It was a bummer because, Paul and I was his first partner. And we started the band together. So that was hard. So anyway, so here we are. And but by this time, Tony and I went to Enigma because we were still signed with Enigma.
Yeah.
And we just felt like, we really want to be a Christian band, because Enigma at that point was saying, okay, that's cool, but you guys need to be a mainstream band and kind of play ball more, and so, yeah. So anyway, so kind of fast forward and stuff. So then Carl is in the band, but and Paul has left. So it's Tony and I, and we went to Enigma and we said, we don't think that we should be here anymore. We just kind of felt like Wes had kind of moved on, Capitol had acquired Enigma. I think Wes left. He was still an owner, but he went and was head of A&R for like Hollywood Records. So our guy was gone. Right. And the new guy, and this happens at labels, when your A&R guy's gone, and you get a new guy, and I think maybe he thought Guardian was okay, but it didn't seem like there was a lot of interest. So basically, we asked to be released from our deal, which everyone goes, you guys are, what? That's crazy. And then ironically, because we knew John and Dino at that point, and they had started Pachyderm Records. So we called them and said, "Hey man, are you guys looking for bands?" He goes, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, we are." I think they had Ex-Sinner signed and stuff. So anyway, Tony and I went down there, talked with them. We knew them. They were Christians. It was a small label, smaller label.
But great quality production.
Yeah. No, we were going.
They were top shelf.
This is going to be great because it was a production company, so it meant they were going to make our record. So we're going, okay. But so we had to get a singer. So there was this nationwide cattle call. And, for a while we were going to have Jimmy from Soldier. He was going to be our singer. And we had all these guys. And then we got this demo tape in the mail from Jamie Rowe, who Tony had actually talked with Jamie on the phone, just kind of as a fan once when Jamie's dad died. And so there was a connection. And Jamie goes, "Hey, Tony, can I send you a tape?" And we had heard Tempest, and Tempest was okay. But we thought, okay, he's another guy. But anyway, we got his demo tape. And it was like him singing a cappella, just like ripping with that big voice of his. And we're like, okay. And John, who's a great singer, goes, yeah, this guy, why don't we fly this guy out? And Jamie had never been on an airplane in his life, he's Indian country boy. So he gets on the plane and he comes out, and he's this big, he's like 6'4" with like red hair and freckles. He's like, at that time, he did not look super rock and roll, at least by our groovy LA standards.
Right.
But we took him down to that same rehearsal studio that we had for all these years. And we just started jamming and we played a few songs. And Tony goes, "I got this new riff that, I'm working on." And so we played it, and it was Power of Love. And Jamie just, "Tell me, can you feel it? Yes, and I." But it was like, okay, that's really good, dude. We're kind of like, we're kind of feeling of this guy, we're kind of thinking, but again, it was like, does he fit? So long story short, John and Dino goes, that's your guy. That's your guy. And Jamie joined, and then it was really fast. We, at that point, we went in the studio really quick, kind of wrote on the fly,
Really? Okay.
John will work with us, and we were like, boom, making Fire and Love. Whole new thing, whole new sound, kind of that sound starting to shift.
Yeah.
It was primarily Tony-driven type riffs. And Jamie's song "Never Say Goodbye," which was on his audition tape. We helped him finish it. We cleaned up lyrics and things like that. But that record got done really quick and then got released. And John and Dino, Epic Records at that time picked us up. We'd been on Capitol through Enigma, but Epic, because we had a little mainstream recognition. They picked it up, and we made a video for Power Love that MTV did play on Headbangers Ball. So this is our sophomore record, so we had a little bit more recognition, and we actually had a Christian label behind us because John and Dino's distribution was through Word O Distribution. So we were on Word and Epic. So the band, and then things took off really fast. We were, all of a sudden we were gigging like all the time. Crowds get bigger and bigger. We were on that climb that like bands go on. We were hot, and it just kept going. We wanted to go back in and make our next record. We were like on the road for like 18 months straight.
Wow.
It was like we had dates. They just kept coming and coming, and we're playing and we're playing and we're getting better and better. So there was a delay between Fire and Love and Miracle Mile, which kind of worked out because I had this idea. I kind of wanted to do a concept, record. I was writing more and more, and my style, because I'm a bass player, I'm not much of a guitar player. So when I write stuff, it's more kind of bluesy and basic. So I started writing stuff and bringing songs in, and we started having this thing where Jamie had his stuff and Tony had his stuff, and Carl wrote too. So we had this new mishmash of songs, and I had this idea for kind of like this old-fashioned traveling medicine show, kind of like a concept, record. I had this thing, and it was Miracle Mile. It was that concept that was kind of like this old traveling medicine show. So Miracle Mile was kind of a concept record, and that was the first record where I finally, I had a little bit of background in graphic design, but this is one where I said, "Hey, we want to do this," and if you're hot, they say, "Yeah, okay, all right."
Right.
I kind of said, "Let me drive the packaging and the imaging and this type of thing," and that's kind of how the whole concept of Miracle Mile came to be, which again kind of broadened our sound. A lot of different flavors in there. Like there's like R&B textures on that record, acoustic. I mean, there's still some good, great guitar rock. And we were still a 4 on the floor rock band, but our sound had kind of expanded. I mean, Tony and I were like Zeppelin fanatics, and that record, because Zeppelin covered a lot of ground in music. So it was a bit more Zeppy, if you will.
Yeah, so I felt like Miracle Mile was like at the peak of your powers, like so to say.
That's still, to this date, that's our biggest selling record. But yeah, Miracle Mile was our apex as far as just things were like happening. We were touring internationally. We toured with Stryper in Europe. We were like playing everywhere. Like, it just, again, we were on the road nonstop. I mean, and that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
So we were growing and growing and growing and growing. And then we decided we should move to Nashville because, LA is great and we're all from LA. Everything we did was primarily in the central states, in the heartland. That was our big tour base. So it made sense to move to Nashville. And the brothers said, well, if we're going to move there too, we're going to open a studio. So they were building Sound Kitchen Studios, but it was under construction. So John had this studio in his house, his kind of temporary house, as they were building houses in Nashville. We set up in John's garage, and that's how we made Swing, Swang, Swung. I mean, it was like, so we kind of had these acoustic songs. It was just supposed to be an EP.
Yeah.
It was just going to be an acoustic EP, but we ended up, again, changing gears even more. That was kind of like our Zeppelin 3. It was kind of like our acoustic record.
Yep.
And again, and that
like
made
Alice in Chains put out.
Right, exactly. And we were influenced by all that stuff, but especially that was, a little Led Zeppelin 3 nod. And it was kind of cool because Nashville, when we came to Nashville, people were not down with hard rock. Like we came to Nashville. Stryper and all those bands were still out in California. We were like the first real,
metal, hard rock.
Yeah, a real 4 on the floor rock band kind of in Nashville. But Swing, Swang, Swung, it actually worked out because that there was some more commercial stuff on there. We got airplay at Christian pop radio, not just rock radio.
Right.
So again, it kind of expanded the band more. And then John and Dino actually sold Pachyderm to Word Records. So all of a sudden we weren't signed to Pachyderm anymore. We were signed to, Word. And that was great because Word was like this
huge,
the big Christian label. Yeah. So all of a sudden, because, a Pachyderm, it was this little indie. All of a sudden we're on this huge label with all this staff and all this kind of stuff. And they put us out on tour with Steve Taylor, who was, who was kind of like the eclectic alternative Christian rock king at that time. And they put us on tour with Steve. And it was a good tour. It was us and a Canadian band, Hocus Pick, and it was a good bill because you had Steve kind of doing his eclectic alternative thing. And then we played, and it was basically Miracle Mile and swing stuff. But we got to be really good friends with Steve on that tour. And our thing with John and Dino had kind of peaked. We didn't really have a falling out, but it was kind of like they were going to work on their studio and building their thing, not as much a label thing. We kind of said, hey man, what would you think about producing us? And he produced stuff like Newsboys and stuff, but he'd never really done a rock band like us. And I think he was going, yeah, cool. Yeah, I've always wanted to do a real rock and roll band. Like, how do you guys set up in a room? And at that point, we were more seasoned players, so we were ready for that. So it was like old school, set up in a room. We cut it because John and Dino, everything was more overdubbed. We cut a lot of buzz live. Some of those tracks, I want to say, Psychedelic Runaway and You've Got One Thing Left to Do. Those drum and bass tracks were cut live. We didn't fix anything. We got them.
Yeah.
That was the actual goal. And usually you'll cut songs and then you'll go back and fix them. So, but that was a whole different sound for us. Everybody thought, you guys were just kind of, changing sounds
because of the music scene.
But really, it was we all had such diverse tastes. A lot of that stuff just kind of happened. It wasn't really planned. We were listening to, we listened to radio. We were listening, Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
It turned out Rikk worked with Dean back at the construction job back in the early days. It's funny how many things are intertwined. So we became, it was a different sound on Buzz. It was a whole different thing. Steve's production style, totally different than the Elefantes.
Yeah.
It was just a
Scenes changed at
different.
that point. Alice in Chains was popular. Sound.
Right, right, right,
So you're like, hey, let's do something.
right,
Something. Now, again,
right.
was it a conscious decision to say, hey guys, this is what's popular right now? Let's
No,
do like
because
that, or
at that point, like I said, when you're selling records, the label doesn't really tell you what to do. And that's the one good thing. They kind of stay out of your hair. So
yeah,
we just kind of said, this is what we want to do. And Word at that time had a new staff, Mark Maxwell was our new A&R guy, Jim Chafee, label chief. They're like, yeah, man, cool. What you guys are doing is working. So we support you.
the packaging with the full
Right.
covers.
Right.
Whose idea was that? Your idea?
That was me. That was me. Yeah. I
That
mean,
has to
again,
be one of the most original packaging I've ever seen, and it's able to fold in a way where you can
well,
be one of them.
I kind of stole that concept when Led Zeppelin did In Through the Outdoor. There was some different covers, and theirs was really cool because I don't know if people know this, but they were those different covers. But you could take a paintbrush with water and paint on those covers, and these different colors would come out. So I thought that's so cool. So eventually we did a more scaled down version. But yeah, Myrrh was cool because again, we were kind of popping at that time.
Yeah,
They said, yeah, cool. And it just folded differently, but you'd see it.
yeah,
There'd be 4 different covers, but it all said Buzz. It was just fun. It was
yeah.
just
That was
something
really
fun,
cool.
just something different because I know how much I like that. I like other
Yeah.
bands' packaging. Like you know how it is. When
Yep.
you get a record, you check out the packaging, especially back in the
Absolutely.
days of vinyl when I was a kid,
Mhm.
Machine Head or Deep Purple. You'd open it up and there's all these pictures of the band. You're going, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. So I
Yep.
think packaging is important. I dig it. It's like
Yep.
I love that stuff.
No, that's
So
records at this point
yeah, which was an imprint of
Word.
Word.
Okay.
Yeah, and an interesting side note here. So at this time, Mark Maxwell, our A&R guy, Word had just picked up distribution in Latin America, which was still kind of a new market for contemporary Christian music. And Mark goes, hey, we're doing this big distribution thing in Latin America. You and Tony grew up in LA. What would you think about taking some Guardian songs, getting Jamie with a vocal coach, doing some of your stuff in Spanish? We're like, sure, why not?
Sure.
That sounds cool, but we didn't really think anything about it. So kind of side note, we'd made Buzz. So we're making this Spanish record, which was some of our more medium tempo and ballady stuff because that market was a bit more pop. Anyway, we made this Spanish record. We thought, oh, that's cool. Didn't really think much of it. Thought, well, that's cool. Why not? So we started to get offers in Latin America. And I remember we got an offer to play a gig in Costa Rica. We're like, sure. I've never been to Costa Rica. Cool. So we go there and they take us to the venue and we're like doing well by indie rock standards in the States. Like we're playing 500 seaters, and that's actually good. You can make your living doing that. So we go down there and they take us to this venue and it's like a 5,000 seat arena. This is where we're playing tonight.
Who's playing?
Who's headlining? They go, you're headlining. I go, what? And they go, oh, you didn't know? They're like playing your Spanish record on the radio, like big time, not just here, but all over Latin America. We're like, so anyway, it opened up this whole odyssey. So we don't speak Spanish. I mean, I grew up in LA, so I speak a little bit, not really. So all of a sudden, we're like playing these big halls and these big crowds, and Jamie's like got his lyric sheets where he's singing phonetically, and he's coming out and he's got his sheets and he's singing these songs in Spanish. There's like 5,000 people like singing back to us in Spanish. We're like, whoa. And it was like, it was a God thing. It was like, man, like what is going on here? And it was just, that was an amazing, the things I saw, if I look back at what happened in Guardian, that whole thing was like, it's so special, so unique. we didn't plan it. It really, we just happened to be, that's something that God chose to use us to do. And that was just, that's a whole different, I could talk about that. And so could all the guys. Some of the experiences that we had there. I mean, to this day, that's like super special.
You came out with Bottle Rocket, I think after
Right. Interesting sidebar there, because I mentioned it. So at that time, we'd kind of peaked in the States. Like record sales were starting to dip. Ironically, we're blowing up in Latin America. But like in the States, where it's like, yeah. So when it came time to make Bottle Rocket, the label got a lot more involved. And that's when they said, okay, you need to be doing this and doing that. You need to
sound modern.
Yeah. You need to be, we got kind of, it's like there's a little bit of babysitting going on, which happens at labels.
Right.
They mean well, but we didn't have as much sway. So, there's some cool stuff on Buzz, but it was kind of like you had mentioned, we kind of peaked. And that happens with like bands. You peak and then you start with like a slow descent. So Bottle Rocket was kind of a turning point for the band.
There was also roughly in, I think, 98, you did covers of Stryper's EP.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people forget about that.
We had, that was just, again, we kind of had our own little label, G-Man, which was just us. We had some recording of gear of our own. We would make these little records, like we do these things, and then we had live bootlegs, things that fans had given us, like our Australian tours in '93. Somebody gave us a tape. We're going, well, that sounds really good. Let's release that. So that was bite-sized meat pies. So we had all this stuff because fans were going, what else do you guys have?
Yeah.
So there's all these little weird Guardian records that came out then. They were just indie released. We'd print 1,000 or 2,000 copies. And at that point, I left the band for a while. By this time we had between Jamie and Tony and Carl and myself, we have 18 kids. So I think, by that time I had 4 kids. It's really hard to be on the road 200 days a year and have a family. Some people can do it. Anyway, I just felt called to leave. And as it turned out, because of my background in graphic design and all that, I started doing a lot of work for labels, whether it's graphic design or kind of, they go, hey, you kind of know how to talk to bands. You want to kind of do A&R for us. So there was some of that going on with some indie labels. But then I got a call from Dan Brock, who ran Forefront Records, which was like the cool youth group, Christian, they had DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline.
Yeah.
St. James, Jeff. And Dan goes, I kind of want to get this guy, Dan Brock, who was the president, who I knew from the Guardian days. And Dan goes, I kind of want to bring a guy in like you who knows what it's like to be in a band, who like artists might trust and can help them with their graphics and their imaging. So I got hired in as VP of artist development, like coming out of the band into being a VP in the EMI system, which was just unheard of. Like, what? They hired David Bach, the bassist from Guardian, to be the head of A&R, but it happened.
Nice.
And that was a great experience. Got to work with DC Talk, who we toured with in the early years. We opened for them on their Free at Last tour, which again, they were smart. Let's bring in a rock band to open. A different audience. So I knew those guys. I knew Toby, Mike, and Kevin, and a lot of those guys, and Jeff Moore, and that kind of thing. Yep. So that kind of began my odyssey.
And they got huge with Jesus Freak. Were you involved with that?
Oh yeah, that was yeah.
It was massive. It was massive.
And that's when Forefront is exploding. Jesus Freak is platinum. Forefront is the hot, label, and I get hired in, and I start working with all these bands, and a lot of other bands on that label, helping them with everything from their look and their image to to also being a voice. Like, okay, Dave, you know what it's like, to be an artist. Help us out here, because there's always a little bit of a rub at times between artists and their record companies.
Sure.
The record company, they're in business, to make money.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that, even Christian labels. Whereas, when you're an artist, you're trying to be true to your art and you hope it sells. But that was kind of a whole change in my career. And they got, for a while, the guy who left, when I left, our good friend Tracy Ferry, who was kind of in and out of Striper, and I think he
Yep.
plays with Bach now. Oh, he's a great guy. He played with them for a while, and then I think he got a gig with Rebecca St. James.
Yep.
So anyway, they got another guy, and they slugged it out for a few more years. We were still friends. And then when that kind of, the band at that point, they also had, like I said, by this time we have 18 kids. So the band kind of came to a halt on its own, but we still kept doing stuff.
Yep. Shows here and there, or
yeah, shows here and there. We
festivals.
did some independent things, and so the band kind of just kept going along. We'd still get offers, to play in Latin America or Europe. We were still had some popularity in Europe. Just kind of kept chugging along through the early 2000s. But by this time, Tony had become a very well-known mix engineer and worked on records and was still doing this. And Carl, who's got a great business mind, was like the Newsboys business manager and kind of got into that. Okay. And Jamie was doing jingles and all kinds of things. So we were all kind of still working in the business and still friends, but just Guardian was kind of just sporadic.
It just kind of naturally dissolved. And not in a bad way. Not in a bad way.
Then,
just
right. But we would still get offers, to play Latin America. We'd always ask Tony. He'd say, "No, man, I'm busy. I can't do it." So we finally, a friend of Carl's, Jamie Perrineau, who Carl knew from church, he goes, "I know this guy. He's a good guitar player." So Jamie came and jammed with us, and we went down and played in Argentina. And he was like, "Man, we should do something." So we started playing with him, and we said, we should maybe make a record. And then we said, "Hey, Tony, you're Tony Palacios. Please, let's play." So we started to, make another record. By this time, it's like 2012 or whatever. Make a record with Jamie and Tony. So we were kind of a 5-piece band, and we did the crowdfunding. We hadn't done anything in a number of years, but we did the crowdfunding, and we made Almost Home, which was kind of our last real studio record after a many years hiatus. A lot of people don't like that record because it's not a hard rocking record. I love that record. I think it's where, again, our sound morphed. We were older, different.
Change over time.
A lot of that's a very Jamie Perrineau flavored record. You can hear a lot of what he brought to our band. And anyway, so we just kind of kept kicking around here and there and doing stuff. And then Jamie Rowe and I were around songwriting ideas. And he and I were really into what I would call kind of the new Southern rock bands like Whiskey Myers, Blackberry Smoke, stuff like that. So we were kind of going, we should do a band like that. And we knew Mike Fian and Rex from White Cross. We knew him, and we said, we should do something. And it was like, yeah, let's do it. And then we got Guardian's old manager goes, "Well, what you guys should do is you should first make an EP, get the Guardian fan base and the White Cross fan base excited again." So we did this kind of this EP where we did some White Cross songs and some Guardian songs. So it's Jamie singing White Cross songs and Rex, But it was a bummer because crowdfunding, like a Kickstarter project for Guardian, wasn't a good experience. What I've learned is you could never raise enough money. And, it's just hard. So anyway, story I'm getting to, because a lot of people don't even know about this album, the Guardian White Cross record. There was contractual weirdness with Guardian and White Cross. So we ended up, because of Apple iTunes, we had to call the album, it was called Revival, but it had to be called The Great White Cross and Guardian, because that's what it said on the actual record cover. Jamie and I worked on that artwork together. It was kind of Miracle Mile-ish, but it's like, so you can't find it. It's like, I don't even know if people, know it's out. And it's kind of cool. We did a really good version of Enough is Enough.
Yep,
the White Cross, hit. And, Scott's a great singer. He's a friend of mine, but like Jamie just crushed it.
Yeah.
And there was almost no bass on the original. So you had my growly bass. Anyway, that came out good. We did a cool cover of Jimi Hendrix, Spanish Castle Magic. But anyway, that project fizzled. It just didn't happen. And then I played bass on Luke Easter from O'Tourniquet, been a long time, a friend of mine. He made a solo record, which is kind of more pop rock. great record. And I think he had Tim Gaines and I played most of the bass on that.
Rhythm section, yes.
Yeah, so I played on that great record. There's a song in there called Sideways that I really liked the bass line I came up with, and it's a great song. So we've kind of all been poking around doing things. So yeah, and then Jamie put out a few solo things, and because he keeps working. He's younger than us, so he's still.
Well, I have his side project, Adrian Gale's really good in that.
Oh yeah, that was a great band. Yeah, because Jamie is this smoking gun for hire, and a lot of bands were like, dude.
Yeah.
Like he was actually a little known story. He was actually in Rat for a little while. Like
really,
they auditioned him. They liked him. Then I think Stephen O'Pearce, he said, no, I want to come back. So, but I mean, he like Tony, Jamie vocally and Tony guitar wise are kind of phenoms. He's done a lot of stuff. Like he's done a lot of voiceovers and things like that. So we all kept kind of doing that. And then the very last thing we did, we got asked to, TBN, the big Christian station.
Yep.
They were doing this special kind of like revisiting a lot of the older CCM acts, which at that point, I guess Guardian was a legacy band. So in 2019, which we'd been totally dormant, we got together and they did like a TV show. It was like they had us play live and they interviewed us. It's cool. It's a bummer because Tony was sick as a dog on the day we shot that episode. So he's not in the interviews. And on stage, if you watch it, he doesn't look. But I mean, he played great. I mean, it's like Tony on a bad day is still great. I mean, he played great. But that was kind of the very last thing that we've done as Guardian. Yeah, and that's kind of where things are now,
Yeah, so I recently saw an interview with Paul Cawley, and he said he's working on new material. So is there any chance of, with the day and age with internet, you can record at home, you don't have to travel?
Right.
It's so much easier now with technology. Would that be open to?
So to be totally transparent about that, Rikk, Hart, because I hadn't talked to those guys much. It was kind of, I think it was awkward for all of us because it was just a bummer the way we'd all kind of parted. It just wasn't optimal. But Rikk called me about 6 months ago and we just started talking as friends.
Yeah.
And he goes, man, I really feel like Guardian's supposed to like the old band, like Fusion. And I go, you mean like the progressive metal, like what we got signed? He goes, yeah, like let's do Fusion Rides again. I've been talking to Paul and, and Paul's so good with that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I said, sure, man, I'm interested. I mean, I don't know what that means. So Paul, Rikk, and I got on the phone and Paul goes, I got this idea. It's kind of this rock opera thing. It's kind of Rush 2112, Yes drama. Oh, I like both those records. That sounds cool. And I know how talented Paul is with that type of big visionary stuff. So he kind of sketched it out, but I'll be honest, where that's at, I haven't heard any music. So I said, I'll do it. But it can't, don't ask me to drive a crowdfunding things. I've done that and it's not fun. And it can't really be Guardian. Because I mean, again, and Paul and Rikk were integral parts of Guardian. But I mean, since 1990, for the last 30 years, I mean, Guardian has been Jamie, Tony, Carl, and myself. I mean, our kids have grown up together. We're like intertwined as brothers. So it's really, it's different. And Paul and Rikk are family too. But I mean, it's
in a different way.
It's different. So that thing with like Paul and Rikk, that could totally happen. I mean, I don't know if they've talked to Tony about it. I haven't talked to Tony about it. But I mean, I'm totally open. But at this point, I'm going, yeah, man, send me something that I can start playing bass along to. So we'll see. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I mean,
but you're open to it.
Totally.
Cool.
Totally. I've learned in my old age now. I mean, never say never about nothing. Like when we did the whole TBN thing, and I think we announced, Guardian's probably done. We didn't mean it like there was animosity for us. Jamie's working on his thing. At that time, I had my own band, Jack Ruby, that I was trying to get off the ground as like a mainstream project. It didn't happen. A lot of bands, bands are hard. It's hard, man. Yep. Most bands fail and break up. So Jamie's doing his thing. So it's not like I would never play with those guys again, but to make a record, Tony has a really high standard. In fact, the whole band standard, is high, and it takes a lot of time and takes a lot of money. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen again. It's just not on the deck right now. I mean, that thing with like Paul and Rikk has been talked about more, but again, I haven't heard anything yet. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it'll happen and maybe it'll be cool. I'm open to it.
Nice. That's cool to hear. So yeah, the fans would love to hear anything with the either the Paul Cawley band side or the Jamie side. We love both bands.
Right.
Both.
No, I get it, because I think about bands I love that I'm a fan of, and they'll do different incarnations, and it's like I like it all because I'm a fan and I like it. So I just want to say to any Guardian fans who are watching, thank you. I had an incredible ride, man. I'm grateful. I mean, I'm grateful. I'm getting choked up, but it's all good, man. Yeah. It's I'm grateful, and I appreciate you doing this. I love talking about Guardian. As you can tell, no loss for words about it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
It's really cool. So I'm excited, and whatever happens.
So we'll end the interview. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, or any other stories you can think of? What were some of your most favorite moments?
Yeah,
you think of in either band?
Yeah, I think a lot of things when I think about it, and just to go back to Rikk and Paul, I think about there was a lot of times in the early days when it was just Paul, Rikk, and I. We'd show up at the studio every night and just grind away. And it was like we just you're just there just playing. And we were kind of playing shows, but not really. It was just all that early stuff. It wasn't fun then, but those are very special memories now. Obviously, the whole playing big shows and doing all that stuff, playing to 100,000 people in Latin America, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What's really special was how God used us in Latin America, and seeing that thing that was way beyond us. That's special. But the whole thing, like, I said, the whole Guardian story, as someone who's kind of been there for the most part from the beginning until now, it's quite an odyssey. And when you talk to any band, I'm sure you interview other bands, everybody's got a great story. The fact that anybody ever had success in the music business is like a miracle unto itself. Like, so many things have to happen, because again, most bands, it doesn't happen. And they may be great bands, they may be great players, but not everything works. So again, I feel fortunate. So I like all of it.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you again, David, and I appreciate.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate what you're doing. This is really cool. Really cool. And I appreciate your hard work on this, and you're doing a great job with it.
Oh, I thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Cool, man.
All right, guys, that's it for the show. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next week.
Okay.
Later. Thanks for watching till the end. You are a legend and a true Guardian fan. I want to thank David Bach for being a guest on the show. I just contacted him, and he was like, hey, yeah, sure, I'd love to do the episode. And we appreciate everything that you had to say and telling us all the memories and the history of the band. If you're like me and you didn't know that Guardian was on TBN a couple years back, I'm going to leave that link in the description below. It's a really cool interview with the band and live performance. So check that out. All right, guys, that's it for this one. See you on the next one. Later.